Dana White cannot let Jon Jones retire. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Fight franchise and a huge dilemma which is about to occur in the heavyweight division after UFC 309 if Jon Jones decides to retire, if he wins the world title, or if Stipe Miocic wins the world title and decides to retire. There is something that may occur in this heavyweight division which may massively lose its legitimacy. I remember, if anyone's remembered, from the UFC back in 2019, I want to say, or 2020, just before the pandemic occurred, there was a time where the UFC was like, okay, we're going to axe off the flyweight division and we're going to get done with it. If anything, this is the best time where the UFC should go, hey, let's axe off the heavyweight division, because if Jon Jones wins that world title and retires, or Stipe Miocic wins that world title at UFC 309, the heavyweight division is about to lose a lot of legitimacy. Let me kind of give you the breakdown and explain what's going on and my thoughts behind it. So, Jon Jones, right now heavyweight champion, one of the best heavyweights in the world, and I'll kind of preface it like this. There are, at the minute, kind of 3 plus Stipe Miocic heavyweights where you go, they are the undoubtedly best MMA heavyweight in the world. You've got Jon Jones, who is the undisputed heavyweight champion. You've got Tom Aspinall, who's the interim heavyweight champion. And then you've got Francis Ngannou, who is outside of the UFC, but we all know he is one of the best MMA heavyweights in the world right now. No debate. You know, these 3 guys have the key to the throne of and have the argument to be the baddest man on the planet, the best MMA fighter, the biggest and baddest MMA fighter in the world. Yes, Islam Makhachev, Alex Pereira, Ilia Topuria, you can argue for pound number 1 right now, but the baddest man on the planet is always who is the best heavyweight in the world. If Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic win that world title and retire, that phrase, that legitimacy phrase that the UFC have held on their heavyweight division for so many years is gone. Yes, Tom Aspinall may be the baddest man on the planet, but without that resume, without that huge win, without that substance to that phrase, it doesn't mean shit. That's the problem the UFC is creating with letting Jon Jones potentially retire if he wins. Now, I'm not saying Jon Jones doesn't have a right to retire. He does. He's his own man. He's made a lot of money. If he don't want to fight, he don't want to fight. We can all say he's ducking Tom Aspinall, but at the end of the day, it's Jon Jones' decision. It's the UFC's plan and should be in the UFC's best interest to make sure neither man retires. Whoever wins out, Stipe and Jon Jones, most likely Jon Jones. The reason being for this is because they fell out with Francis Ngannou. If Francis Ngannou was still in the UFC, I wouldn't have this problem with the heavyweight division right now. I'm going to kind of break it down in a minute through the rankings. But the heavyweight division, if one of those guys goes, Tom Aspinall's legacy is so... It's good, but it has no legitimacy to it. It has no weight to it because he's not beat the guy who beat the guy. He hasn't got that huge name win on his record. And if, let's say, for example, he gets 10 heavyweight title defenses against the rest of the contenders, nothing's going to feel legitimate, and I'm going to kind of break this down for you. So I've got the top 15 current heavyweight rankings in the world at the minute. So champion, we've got Jon Jones. So then after that, we've got Tom Aspinall, the interim. So at number 2, we've got Ciryl Gane, who Francis Ngannou has already beaten and Jon Jones has already beaten. Then you've got in 3rd, Alexander Volkov. Tom Aspinall's already beat. Sergey Pavlovich, Tom Aspinall's already beat. Curtis Blades, Tom Aspinall's recently beat, and Francis Ngannou has beat twice. Jailton Almeida, neither guy has faced Jailton Almeida out of Tom and Francis Ngannou, but he got beat by Curtis Blades. You got Sergey Spivak, Aspinall's already beat him. You've got Miocic, Francis has already beat. Marcin Tybura, Tom Aspinall's already beat. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Francis has already beat. That is the current UFC top 10 in the heavyweight division. Bar Jailton Almeida, they, either Francis Ngannou or Tom Aspinall, has beaten because neither of them have faced Jailton Almeida. And that's the huge problem. There is nobody because heavyweight is the worst it's ever been. When you look at the quality of the heavyweight division, it is awful at the moment. When people were saying, oh, cut the flyweight division, they're not entertaining. Flyweight can have some very, very entertaining fights with the pace of it, the skill level of it. heavyweight's entertaining due to the KOs, but this is the worst era of MMA heavyweights since the early days, since the very start of heavyweight, because the best heavyweights were in Pride. I know you had a bunch of guys like James Toney, I think, was in the heavyweight division when he came over from boxing. You had Zuluzinho, you had some absolute terrible heavyweights. But then it got better, the era got better. And then when you look at the era that just went, which Francis was just the end of, that era of heavyweights where you had Kane, JDS, DC, Stipe, Overeem, Fabricio Verdum, you had so many great heavyweights. But when you look at the heavyweight division now, they're awful. And I'm not saying, fair play, some of them are doing quite well. Alexander Volkov, I'll give huge credit to. He's bounced back very well. He's improved his MMA game, and he's on a bit of a hot streak at the minute. And if he beats Cyril Gane, which is going to come up at UFC 310, it's a close fight. And going into it, I may predict Volkov, but he will earn a title shot. But outside of that, there's no legitimacy in any contender. There's no legitimacy in any wins for Tom Aspinall if he becomes undisputed champion. Because what the UFC has done, they've effed themselves over, really, losing potentially Jon Jones. And they've already lost him, Francis Ngannou, because Tom Aspinall's legacy will not have any legitimacy. That claim of the baddest man on the planet, you've let it wash away with either Jon Jones or Francis Ngannou. Aspinall needs a Francis or a Jon Jones on his resume, so we can look at him and go, there's the baddest man on the planet. There's one of the best fighters in the world. There's the UFC heavyweight champion. That's who is the man who would be any other living man on the planet. And for all we know, Tom Aspinall would beat these guys. But if it never happens in the octagon, then it's just on paper. We need it to translate into reality in the octagon. But that's the issue which is being caused right now due to Dana White and the UFC's stubbornness. And fair enough, Francis Ngannou wouldn't play ball. He wanted a bit more rights for the fighters, which is not a bad thing, but he probably wanted an exorbitant amount of money. But it feels like Dana has priced Francis out. Francis has priced himself out the UFC. But if I was the UFC, you've got Saudi money coming in. You've got Riyadh season coming in. I swear, PFL just did a card in Saudi for Francis Ngannou to face, what's that big Brazilian heavyweight? I can't remember his name, but he's just beat. Saudi will pay the money to have Francis Ngannou back in the UFC, but you've priced yourself out against him, which has ruined Tom Aspinall's chance at a legitimate claim to being the baddest man on the planet, because while Francis Ngannou is fighting in PFL, it won't count. And I know a lot of people will say he got slept by Joshua. Joshua would probably sleep Tom Aspinall as well in a boxing match. It's a totally different sport. Let's not get them mixed up. But in MMA, if you don't bring Francis back, Tom Aspinall's legacy is just illegitimate. You're ruining your own heavyweight division. This is the problem you're causing. And to be honest with you, Tom Aspinall, yes, we'll watch the main events when he main events a pay-per-view, but I don't think any of us will really care, because it would be an entertaining 2-minute fight where he knocks the guy out. But when you look at the top 10 right now, they've all been beaten by either Francis Ngannou or Tom Aspinall. The only one who hasn't is Jailton Almeida, because he's never fought either of them. So he's the only fresh matchup who hasn't been beaten by two of the best heavyweights in the world if Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic retires. They're creating a huge paradox, if you will, which is just effing up the heavyweight landscape. And this is something Dana White, UFC need to fix, because I'll be honest with you, when you compare it to boxing's heavyweight division, it is just night and day how good boxing's heavyweight division is compared to the UFC's. And this is supposed to be this was for so many years the premier division of the UFC. That heavyweight division would always get in at least 300, 400k pay-per-view buys. When you looked at, and it probably will with Tom Aspinall at the helm, because the British fans will watch, but the excitement won't be there because they've all lost. And the only real fresh contender you're going to get is if Cyril Gane beats Volkov and earns the title shot. Yeah, we're going to be excited for that matchup. Do it in the UK versus France. We'll get hyped. After that, who is there? Nobody. There's literally no one for Tom Aspinall to fight. Pavlovich rematch, don't really care. Blades, he's on a losing streak. Jailton Almeida, he needs to win 2 or 3. Spivak needs to win a few. Stipe Miocic is 8th in the rankings. He's going to probably retire. Rosenstruck needs to go on a bit of a streak. That would be a cool matchup, someone Tom hasn't fought, but he's 10th in the rankings at the minute. He's going to need a few wins to justifiably earn a title shot. The heavyweight division is an absolute shit show and a mess. You know, we had Rebellis Despain, you know, that huge, biggest reach in heavyweight history, so much hype KO artist, has his first fight, wins in 17 seconds. He's been cut from the UFC because he couldn't win against this talent pool of heavyweights. It shows how shit the heavyweight division is. And then the other issue is a lot of these massive heavyweights just choose to do different sports. These huge athletes choose to play NFL. They choose to play basketball. They choose to play, you know, all these other kind of sports because they pay better as well. That's a huge problem with the UFC. They earn the pay once they get up the rankings. And it's easy to get up the rankings at heavyweight, but it's easy to get fraud checked in the top 5 because your skill level doesn't translate. Look at someone like Sergey Pavlovich. 5-fight KO win streak, comes up against someone with an actual legitimate skill set, gets KO'd straight away. Faces another guy with a legitimate skill set in Volkov, gets pieced up for 3 rounds. Pavlovich is on a 2-fight losing streak. He's down in the division. It's just, the UFC has a huge dilemma they're causing on their hands. If Jon Jones retires, or if they don't re-sign Francis Ngannou, the UFC is effed. The heavyweight division is effed. Tom Aspinall's legacy is effed because it won't have no legitimacy to it. Because when you're going to finish, Tom Aspinall could win the next 10 fights and defend his title 10 times and tie Anderson Silva for title defenses and tie Demetrius Johnson for title defenses. But he'll never overtake them because the quality of his wins will never be on the quality of those guys' wins. Because when we break down the GOAT conversation, yes, records matter, yes, type of wins matter, but the opponents you face matter. That's why DJ never ever gets past number 2 in the pound for pound list or the GOAT conversation list. The reason being the level of competition he faced compared to someone like a GSP or a Jon Jones, it just was never high enough because the talent pool wasn't there. If you look at flyweight now, if Pantoja goes on a run, defends his title 10 times, he'll be in the GOAT conversation. Why? Because the talent pool at 125 now is unreal. The talent pool at heavyweight is shit, so Tom Aspinall will never build that legitimate legacy. So the UFC is causing a huge problem for themselves. If Jon Jones retires and they don't sign Francis Ngannou, Tom Aspinall will have no legitimacy to stand on in his title reign. Yeah, we'll all say, yeah, he's the heavyweight champion, but in the back of our minds, we'll all know when you've got a top 10, which has already been cleaned by... Tom's already beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top 10. The rest, he's not faced. Francis has beat 4 of the top 10. Combined, they've cleaned out nearly the whole top 10. The only ones they haven't beat are Jon Jones and Jailton Almeida because they've never fought them. A huge problem in the top of the heavyweight division. The UFC need to fix it. What do you guys think of the heavyweight division? Do you think it's the worst it's ever been? Do you think the UFC needs a rehaul and needs an Ultimate Fighter to bring in new talent? They need to scout around the world to get the new heavyweight talent in. Do you think Tom Aspinall's legacy is in trouble if Jon Jones or Francis Ngannou, he never faces them? Put your thoughts in the comments down below. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more MMA and fight content coming soon. We hope you enjoyed the video and we'll catch you in the next one.